the two most important political issues that we're facing in our country right now, that if we could resolve them would solve the majority of our problems, is that we have to find a way to curb the power of the Federal Reserve. Maybe ending the Fed is unrealistic, but we have to stop. We have to stop the Fed from printing more money and endlessly expanding credit. And then we have to stop fighting forever in endless foreign wars. Chase Oliver is fantastic on both of those issues that I think are incredibly important. And if you're a libertarian, I think that we need to support that.
Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you. Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 223. I'm talking to Alex Bernardo, who is a part of the Protestant Christian Libertarians podcast. Is that right?
Yeah, my podcast is called the Protestant Libertarian Podcast, and it's hosted by the Libertarian Christian Institute.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, they have several podcasts. They're doing some interesting things. Jacob Winograd and some other people. We're going to talk about the Libertarian Party's presidential candidate, Chase Oliver, and what we think makes him good, and maybe get to some other issues going on with the Libertarian Party right now. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing pretty good, Chris. Thanks again for having me on today, man. I appreciate it.
How did you get into all this?
Like libertarianism in general, or the podcast in particular? Okay. So
how did you become a libertarian?
Yeah, so I grew up in the state of Kentucky, just conservatism was kind of in the air. And so I always thought, like when I was in high school, that I guess I was like a Republican. I never thought about politics philosophically. And it wasn't until I went to college and started, my degree's in biblical studies, and I started studying the Bible at a time when in New Testament scholarship, anti-imperial readings of the New Testament were very, very popular. And that caused me for the first time to really think about my political perspective as a Christian. And as I got older, I began to realize that if I was going to take my faith seriously and what I believe that the Bible said about government seriously, then I should kind of hold the government at arm's length. But I didn't really know what that meant from the standpoint of political philosophy. So in 2012, I didn't vote for anybody. And there were some issues where I was like, okay, I kind of see like with marijuana and gay marriage and things like that. I was like, I really don't believe that even though I might have certain opinions on whether or not I think those are morally viable, I don't think the government should tell people that they can't do that. And then on the flip side with the Republicans, I was like, well, I can kind of see how welfare holds people back and enables them, and how if your government is too big, it actually suppresses innovation and productivity. But I didn't know that there was a political philosophy that combined ideas like that. And it wasn't until 2016 where I knew that I wasn't going to vote for Donald Trump, and I knew I wasn't going to vote for Hillary Clinton. And so I started exploring my other options. And I remember seeing Gary Johnson and Bill Weld on Anderson Cooper's show on CNN. I think he interviewed him. They did like a presidential town hall with him. And then they did another one with Jill Stein. But I saw the Gary Johnson one, and I heard Gary Johnson talking about all of these things that I was like, well, I agree with all of this. We need to limit the size of the government. Our military is way too powerful. We should make weed legal. We should allow people to do what they want. Like all of this stuff sounds exactly like my political philosophy. And so I was like, well, I guess I'm a libertarian. And from that point on, I've been reading more literature and become convinced of the philosophy.
Yeah. When was that about?
So it would have been in the fall of 2016. And I would say that really for about 4 years, I was committed to libertarianism, but I was certainly like what you would call a classical liberal within that tradition. I still believe that there was a small role for the government to provide welfare, maybe a small role for public schools and some other publicly funded services. I basically thought that we needed everything the government provided, just at a much, much smaller level. And it wasn't really until COVID in 2019, or COVID in 2020, where I realized just how corrupt government was and what government would do with our rights the moment that there was a crisis. And that was a big turning point in my worldview. And that's when I really started reading like Hayek and Mises and Rothbard, and was just convinced that they had a language and a philosophy that accurately explained everything that I was seeing during that time.
It's very interesting to see how I'm finding people now admitting that their views on things changed because of this. Unfortunately, I've seen some libertarians leave, but I've also seen some people it seems like it's radicalized a lot of people in a lot of different ways. there's definitely a search for bad guys and a desire to punish here. But so when did you get involved with the Libertarian Party?
So I voted for obviously Gary Johnson in 2016, and then I voted for Joe Jorgensen in 2020. And I think it was maybe towards the end of 2020 or the beginning of 2021 where Bill Schultz, who is or was the chair of our county LP affiliate, reached out to me. I didn't know him. He texted me and just said, "Hey, my name's Bill. I'm with the Libertarian Party Canton County. We know that you voted Libertarian. If you want to come to our party meetings, you can do that. Here's when they're at." And so it took me about 6 months to really kind of work into my, because I didn't really know anything about the Libertarian Party or anything like that. And I went for the first time, really liked talking to everyone that was there, thought that they were great and they were doing a lot of good work. And so I've been going regularly for the last 2.5 to 3 years.
Yeah, that's good to know. What, you know, it's really cool. I definitely regard Jesus as a good libertarian, but I've never actually met somebody who came to a libertarianism because of Jesus. But it sounds like you did. That's what do you think we can get every Christian to come to libertarianism?
Yeah, I mean, I really do believe that if people understand that God created human beings, and you can look at this is really the main point of the creation narratives in Genesis, that God created human beings to rule over this creation on his behalf. So God creates us in his image, and it's our responsibility to take care of this earth. The only thing that God does not give human beings dominion over are other human beings. And I think that once we understand that insight, then that allows us to start stripping away this idea that we need to constantly interfere in the private affairs of other people. And we also have to realize too, like in the teachings of Jesus, Jesus calls everyone to repentance, but if they don't want to repent, they get to walk away. Like in the New Testament, there is not a single example of Jesus or Paul or Peter, or any of the leaders of the early church using the power of government to force people to embrace Christian values. If you don't want to be a Christian and if you don't want to follow Jesus, you don't have to, and you have the right to walk away. Now, again, like in the long run, like eschatologically, like on the last day, there might be consequences for that theologically, but there's never an attempt to make anyone believe in this down. You do it through convincing people that the gospel is true. And I think that if once Christians realize that that's just the way that the New Testament works, then the most consistent political expression of those New Testament principles is libertarianism, because we believe that as long as you're not interfering with the rights of somebody else, then you have the right to do whatever you want with yourself and with your property. And I think that while that means that we can certainly say there are certain behaviors that are morally bad and there are certain behaviors that are morally good, and we can talk about the material benefits that derive from those behaviors, we don't really have a right as Christians to force people to do things that they don't want to do as long as they're not impacting somebody else. And I just think that that's a deeply biblical principle that a lot of Christians have completely ignored.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. So what was your impression? What you liked Jorgensen, and obviously you're supporting Chase Oliver now.
Mm-hmm.
Were you supporting Chase before the convention, or did you? Or did that come after Chase won?
Yeah, I mean, I had Chase Oliver on my show, I guess in the summer of 2023. So it's a little over a year ago I had him on, and I really liked him. I love what he did when he was in Georgia. I thought when he debated Adrian Warnock down there and forced a runoff in their election, he did a very great job of presenting the libertarian message. And it is really cool. And this is something that I wish that a lot of Mises Caucus people that are kind of reflexively against Chase Oliver would understand. He got on a debate stage where there were thousands and thousands of people watching and absolutely destroyed a Democratic candidate. It was beautiful to see, and we need more people that are clear communicators like that. So I had him on the show. I really like him. I thought I liked him personally. I thought that he was a good guy, and I thought that he was a very good and consistent libertarian. I also had Josh Smith on my show and talked to him. I like Josh Smith a lot, and going into the convention, Josh Smith was my preferred candidate. I liked his messaging. I loved that he was a blue-collar guy. I thought that he got it. But like Chase Oliver would have been my number two. I thought that Michael Rectenwald is really intelligent. I love his writings. I think that he's a good communicator, but I don't think that he was the most effective vessel for a libertarian message. And so when I saw that Chase Oliver won the nomination. I wasn't upset about that at all. I was like, okay, well, Chase, he's a libertarian that shares the vast majority of my beliefs, so I'm going to support Chase Oliver. That's just the way that it's going to go. And so that has been so I've never had any animosity towards him at all. And like I said, all along, I've planned on voting for Chase, and we'll do that come November.
I invited all the candidates on, and Joshua Smith was, for whatever reason, the only one I couldn't get on here. But I got it. Alex, this is something I've wondered about, and obviously, how the party, wondering about how the party does things. I'm getting the impression that a lot of people who supported Joshua Smith couldn't afford to go to the convention, the national convention, to nominate him. Yeah. Do you think that's true? Or I guess I'm wondering, how would this nomination have went if everybody could have traveled there for free?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that that's a part of it. And I'll be completely honest with you. I have a very tenuous understanding of how the internal politics of the Libertarian Party works. But I do know that when it comes to voting, a lot of it comes down to support groups and who shows up to cast the ballots. And I do think that probably has a large part to do with it. I think, to Chase's credit, he did start his campaign a lot earlier than almost any of the other Libertarian candidates. And so he had a great network. He traveled every state. He put in the time, he put in the effort. And so he just had the people that were there to show up for him. And I think that they were able to, and I know that there are some people that said that, especially in the last couple of rounds of voting, that there were some, I don't know what the best term is. There were some deals that were less than optimal, I guess, that were made in order to secure the nomination. But at the end of the day, it seems like they put in the effort to make that happen. But I agree. I think that Josh Smith, it felt like online he had a lot of support and that there was a lot of traction behind him. But I just don't think that he had the right amount of people that showed up. And I really do feel like, and again, I love the Mises Caucus and a lot of what the Mises Caucus has done. But I was very baffled by them jumping the gun and throwing their lot behind Michael Rechtenwald so early in the campaign, when I thought that there would be other people like Joshua Smith who did a better job of carrying on the ideas and values of the Mises Caucus. Again, Rechtenwald's great, but he's an academic, and that's not really, when I look at the current state of the Libertarian Party, that's not really the mood or the vibe of the current LP. And so it just felt like there was a disjunction between him and Joshua Smith.
Yeah, and I don't know who else the Mises Caucus had asked to run for president. So it's
yeah, I think everyone wanted Dave Smith.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and Chase of course had experience having a Senate run. I think having a few other runs. It's, you don't necessarily want to say to somebody who's never climbed a mountain, go to Everest. You right. Might want them to try a 5,000-foot mountain first or something like that. You weren't at the convention. I mean, I was there, and it was that was a pretty wild experience. It's definitely drains you a lot. You watch, Chase actually seems to be pretty Christian himself. He certainly talks about his time in the church. And I remember one thing I asked him, you can be passionate without being angry. And I was like, I wish I could do that. Right. And I just, and I said, how do you do that? He said, it was just something he learned in church, And Chase always presents a good experience, or a good appearance. He looks professional. He's pretty articulate. He seems like he's learned a lot at going out and doing things. So were you watching the convention online?
I followed it mostly through Twitter. I saw some clips here and there. I did watch the entirety of Donald Trump's speech, which was just, it was crazy to see that happening. But most of what I was doing was just kind of following the people online that were there. Which, again, through Twitter, you got a pretty good, I think, handle on all the major events that took place.
I don't know if I think there was a contingent of libertarians who basically just disappeared when Trump was speaking, because I was sharing a room with another guy from Travis County, and I just said, hey, let's get out of here and go out to eat. So we went out to eat, down at this place, maybe a few blocks away, and just kind of hung out, and we didn't want to be there. We just said, we're not going to be there at all. We'll just wash our hands of it. But what did you see? What did you see? Tell us about the whole Trump speech. As somebody, you weren't there, but you weren't there physically, but you watched it.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the coolest things that I've ever seen in politics was when Donald Trump was walking out on stage and all the libertarians were chanting "In the Fed." Like, I thought that was just such a beautiful and incredible moment. I'm like, man, that's what our party represents. Like, that's the thing that we represent. I thought that Donald Trump was not his best at that. It felt like he stuck to a script the entire time. I mean, he had some good. Trump is Trump. The whole political circus in the United States is always about Donald Trump. He knows that. He understands that that's why he won in 2016. And so I think the entire time he was really just trying to convince these libertarians that they should vote for Trump. I do think that getting him to, and again, Trump is someone who makes promises and doesn't keep them, because I think he's blown by the winds of political expediency. But he did say that he was going to free Ross Ulbricht. And I think that he said some other things about, putting a libertarian in his cabinet that were really, really good. Whether or not, if Trump wins the election, he's actually going to do any of those things, I'm very skeptical that is the case. But I thought that it means something about the work that has been put into the Libertarian Party, that the former president of the United States felt like he had to come to our convention and try to convince us to vote for him. And I appreciate in some respects that he did that. And again, that sends a signal, I think, that there are a lot of Americans out there that are looking for an alternative. So even though I felt like Trump was kind of underwhelming in his speech, and it was more or less just like, you need to, not support libertarians because you're only going to get 2% of the vote, and you should support Donald Trump instead. I kind of expected he was going to say all of that stuff, but I loved what his speech represented culturally. And it makes me feel more optimistic that definitely not this election cycle, maybe not in 2028, but maybe in the future, the Libertarian Party, or at least libertarianism, will have a more active and powerful voice in American political discourse. That was kind of my take from the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Did you see any of the others, or did you just watch Trump?
I mean, I saw Michael Rectenwald, I guess the infamous Gummy Gate speech, which that was kind of fun. And I got some bits and pieces here and there. A lot of it was just kind of standard. That's the thing about the Libertarian Party, though, is that it's not like I feel like all of the major candidates have more or less the same political philosophy. So it really does come down to, like you were saying with Chase Oliver about his presentation, a lot of it comes down to messaging and presentation. We agree on like 95% of the fundamentals. How are we going to communicate that to the wider world in the way that's appealing to the average normal voter who will never sit down and read a book on economics or political philosophy? So, as I was listening through some of this stuff, it was just basically, I felt like a lot of these candidates were just they weren't really making the case for their political values, because everyone already accepts what their political values are going to be. It was more like, here's why you should vote for me or support me as an individual. And I don't know. I guess there's some value in that, but that's not what really interests or animates me.
Yeah, we all find things that animate us. So what do you think are the best reasons to vote for Chase in this election?
I mean, I think the best reason to vote for Chase is that he's a libertarian. Like, if you're a libertarian, and I've become convinced over the last couple of years that the two most important political issues that we're facing in our country right now, that if we could resolve them, would solve the majority of our problems, is that we have to find a way to curb the power of the Federal Reserve. Maybe ending the Fed is unrealistic, but we have to stop. We have to stop the Fed from printing more money and endlessly expanding credit. And then we have to stop fighting forever in endless foreign wars. Chase Oliver is fantastic on both of those issues that I think are incredibly important. And if you're a libertarian, I think that we need to support that. Like, I can understand, I live in a deep red state. So no matter what happens, all 8 of Kentucky's electoral votes are going to go to Donald Trump. And there's nothing that I or anyone else can do about that. That's just the reality. So I understand that it's very easy for someone in my position to go to the voting booth on election day and pull the lever for Chase Oliver and feel good about it because I'm a libertarian voting for libertarian principles in the state that's going to go for Trump. I can understand why there might be some libertarians that live in purple states, swing states like Ohio or Pennsylvania or whatever, Arizona, that could go either way, that might say, you know what, like, Trump is bad. Kamala Harris is obviously much worse. So maybe this time around I need to support Donald Trump. It's hard for me, though, because Donald Trump's record was so terrible in 2016, and he seems to be talking a good game on some issues on the campaign trail, but he didn't deliver on any of his promises the first time around. So, like, as a libertarian, what makes me think that he's going to deliver on these promises the second time around? And I would hate to be in the position of throwing my vote behind Donald Trump and away from the Libertarian Party, only to have him win and then not actually follow through on any of the libertarian promises that he's made to the party. So I think that that's the real danger. Again, I don't, and I actually had a debate over at the Libertarian Christian Institute on our green room a couple of weeks ago with Dave from the System Is Down podcast. And he's a really nice guy, and he's planning on voting for Trump. Because of what he feels like Trump represents. I totally respect that position, and I totally get it. But I just feel like in order for me to be consistent as a libertarian, I need to vote for the libertarian candidate. And then too, I guess another as an added layer on this, I am a Christian, and so for me, I believe that all human beings are created in the image and likeness of God. Like I was saying before, war is a very personal and theological issue for me. Like, I think that God hates war, and I think that as Christians, we always need to be against every single modern war, and we should do absolutely everything that we can to stop American imperialism from killing more innocent people overseas. The reality is that Donald Trump is a war criminal. He was complicit in the war on terror. He made a bunch, and he sounded good on his campaign trail. He talked about the military-industrial complex, and granted, we didn't get any more wars, but at the end of the day, his record is very, very bad. And he's not come out and apologized for the war crimes that his administration committed. And as a Christian, I can't vote for someone that's a war criminal. I just can't do it, And so for me, like, it's so easy to go and vote for Chase because I know he's not a war criminal. I know that on 95% of the issues that I care the most about, he's perfect.
It seems like our standards have gotten so low now. It's like, well, Trump is a war criminal, but he's less of a war criminal than his two predecessors.
Yeah.
So, which is true, but it's like, this is the thing I would try to tell people about this whole, voting for the lesser of two evils. It just gets into this declining spiral in which they both get worse. I mean, ever since Andre Maru, I've had people telling me that I've thrown my vote away, but I said, my goodness, look at what Andre Maru was running against versus what Chase Oliver is running against now. Oh, I mean, I never thought I would miss Bill Clinton. And I remember during early years of the second Bush, there were those bumper stickers that said, "I never thought I would miss Nixon." I mean, it's just, but it's true. It's
it's absolutely and completely true. And this is what I wish that more people would understand. It doesn't matter what party a politician is affiliated with, and it doesn't matter what their rhetoric is. All that matters is policy. And if you take a look at George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden, their policies are not that much different. Yes, we did not invade any new countries under Donald Trump. Now, he had an opportunity to end the war in Yemen that he did not take. He did increase drone strikes in Afghanistan that killed thousands and thousands of innocent people. He made a lot of tactical decisions that were, in my opinion, very dangerous and wrong as commander-in-chief. Yeah, of course. As a libertarian, was he better on war than Bush or Obama? 100%. But under Donald Trump, the size of the federal budget grew, the deficit grew, military spending grew, and so he is more of a progressive in terms of spending than either of his predecessors. And yeah, we got some tax cuts. That's great. But he didn't do anything to curb government spending, which is just fueling this problem. He also publicly berated Jerome Powell for not keeping interest rates low enough. So he obviously doesn't understand kind of the basic principles of monetary theory. And I just don't believe that Donald Trump is anything other than a socialist and a war criminal who's going to spend more of my money and not actually solve our problems, because in as much as, yes, he pisses off all the right people, which is Trump's one redeeming quality. He makes the left furious, and I love it. It's fun to see. It's great to see. But in terms of policy, he's no different. He's no different than any progressive candidate that we've had this century or any progressive president we've had this century. And I just don't see Donald Trump changing anything. Now, like it's like I told Dave on the show, I hope that if Donald Trump wins the election, that in 2 years I'm wrong and that Donald Trump has solved all of our problems. And I will get back. I'll get on any podcast in the world and let anyone humiliate me for 2 minutes for not believing in Donald Trump and what he can do. But I saw what he did between 2016 and 2020, or I guess 2017 and 2021, and he didn't deliver. And I don't think that he's going to do it again.
Yeah, and not to mention, the whole promoting Anthony Fauci and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean that just is, and that was the one thing that I don't think any of us in 2016 would have possibly predicted.
No.
And it kind of scares me too. What's some horrible thing that I haven't thought of that he might do? It's I don't know where we go from that. It's that to me it's really impacted things in a lot of different ways that I never expected. I think the inflation and all that's happened come from that, and now sometimes, yeah. So, I think Chase is anti-war and Trump is so pro-Israel. I don't know where Trump is on the other wars, but Israel could drag us into everything like this. I don't know where this is going to go, but I don't see it ending well. Although curiously enough, AIPAC has given more money to Kamala Harris than Trump has, than they have to Trump. So they're definitely betting on both horses here, and they'll have a horse no matter who wins. It's
Yeah, I mean, but that's the reality is that the military industrial complex always wins. And I tell people this all the time. I think that had Al Gore won the presidential election in the year 2000, I don't think anything would have been different. I think that we would have invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. I think that we would have eventually gone into Yemen and Somalia and Syria and Pakistan and all of these. I don't think that the war on terror would have been meaningfully different had Mitt Romney beaten Barack Obama or had Al Gore beaten George Bush. Both parties support never-ending war, and both parties grow the size of the defense budget for the United States year in and year out. And you're absolutely right. Like even listening to a couple of weeks ago when Harris and Trump had their CNN debate, or a week or two ago, whenever that was, Trump's answer to the war in Ukraine was pretty good. He wants to find a resolution to that war. He thinks it's unnecessary and expensive, and he wants to find a peaceful solution. But then when it came to him and Kamala Harris on the state of Israel, I mean, they both fundamentally agreed that Israel is an important American ally and we should support them. Trump's only real response was that, well, if I was president, it never would have happened because they never would have had the guts to go in there and on October 7th and attack Israel like that. But but that's not a policy solution. And I again, it's like you were saying, yeah, AIPAC has thrown a ton of money behind Kamala Harris because you're absolutely right. They're betting on both horses, but he's terrible on Israel, and I genuinely don't see any drawdown under Donald Trump because he wasn't principled the first time, and he allowed himself to be surrounded by people like John Bolton and James Mattis and just some of the worst neocon hawks in the world. And I don't see him learning his lesson and doing anything different this time around. I don't.
Trump does. It often seems as though Trump has had some very good corrections of some of his worst mistakes, like, going from Anthony Fauci to Scott Atlas. But I just wonder if we can afford the first mistakes.
Right.
And I agree. I want Ross Ulbricht to be free, but I mean, so one guy is enough. That's all you're going to take. I might have given Trump, okay, here's a list of 20 people that I want you to pardon them, and not to mention that, people like Roman Sterlinglov in the Bitcoin fog case and some of the people involved with the New Hampshire Crypto 6. I mean, there's people are, some cases, it's getting illegal to write code, and that just is not a good thing. And of course, absolutely. And definitely, I think much more important than Ulbricht, Snowden.
Yeah.
Edward Snowden, I think is more important. And I think I was the one who told Chase about this. I said, he's been in there longer than anyone. Leonard Peltier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. And Donald Trump said he's going to free Ross. That's awesome. Yeah. We need that. But again, even if he gets elected, he said he's going to do it on day one. Will he actually do it on day one? I don't see that happening. And I think that this is where, we were talking about this a little bit before the show. I understand the idea of trying to squeeze concessions out of the Republican Party. The reality is the Democratic Party is a hopeless train wreck right now. I don't think they're going to come back without fracturing. I don't see how given the current trajectory of the Democratic Party becoming more and more radical, I don't see how the Democratic Party is going to hold together. I think the Republican Party also has a lot of fractures that are very similar, but I think that because there's always been at least a core within the Libertarian, or there's always been a core of people within the Republican Party that have libertarian inclinations, I see the Republican Party being a little bit more stable in the long run. But I understand trying to get concessions out of the Republican Party, and I think that to a certain extent that strategy could work. However, the Mises Caucus's original goal of decentralized revolution, starting from the ground up, putting all of our money and effort into winning local campaigns, which has paid off in my state. Like I know people, Bill Schultz, we were talking about him before the show, the guy that introduced me to the Libertarian Party. He won an election and he's now the top city councilman in a small city, which is not nothing. Like that's important. We need more of that in there. And so if the decentralized revolution stayed focused on winning those local races and putting our effort and energy into those local races, then I think that we would be a lot more productive. And to a certain extent, like going back to what we were saying before, the deep state bets on both horses. I genuinely don't believe that this election is going to change the trajectory of the United States of America. It doesn't matter if Trump wins or Kamala Harris wins. I think we're going to get more spending, more debt, more war over the next 4 years. I think that it might actually be a good lesson for the Republican Party if they lost because libertarians refused to vote for them because they're unprincipled. And then maybe they'd have to come back and say, okay, so there are, 3 to 5% of the population that are voting libertarian year in and year out. And they're further to the right and they're more anti-government than the average Republican. And maybe that would finally force the Republican Party en masse to maybe not change, but maybe not change all of their policies, but I think it would force them en masse to reckon with libertarian philosophy in a way that they currently don't have to. And so, I mean, again, if it was just as a matter of like pure political reality, I do kind of hope that Trump beats Kamala Harris because, going back to, I think he will be marginally less worse than her. But I don't know, maybe the Republican Party needs to continue to lose until they figure out that there are plenty of people in America who would vote for them if they actually believed in limited government.
True. I think Chase says, I actually disagree with you on the Democrats being fractured, because ideally that party really just follows whatever are the intellectual trends at the Ivy League colleges. And that is a very, it's amazing how colleges are allegedly, dedicated to free and open debate. And yet there's almost no diversity of opinion among these people. Yeah. I mean, I take every opportunity I can on the show to bash them, but really, the blue team just follows whatever the intellectuals are putting out there. So I think the red team is much more in danger of fracturing right now, because there seem to be a disparating group of interests. They're the Christians. They're the neocons have kind of left, but and then there's the Christians. I think there's a much more secular conservative movement now, and there's people who clearly are just come home, and the small town America people, and there's a lot of different interests there, and I don't really see anything that brings them together other than the fact that we hate the people on the left. They know they're taking us down the wrong road.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I definitely think that's a fair point. I guess my point about the left, and I would love to get your opinion on this, but when I was at Freedom Fest in Las Vegas, Robert F. Kennedy spoke there, and I met a lot of his supporters, and almost all of them were disaffected Democrats that were just really upset with the direction that the party was going. And I thought that even though the media kind of blackballed him this time around, well, not kind of blackballed him, they did blackball RFK this time around. I really do feel like there were a lot of people that used to be like center left that just can't support how radical the Democratic Party has become. But you do make a good point about the Republican Party. I'm not really sure if there is a philosophical center to the Republican Party anymore. It's certainly not classical liberalism. It's certainly not limited government. A lot of it, I do think that, and maybe a lot of this has to do with academia and with the media and just kind of the marketing incentives of giving consumers of news emotionally appealing content. But it seems like the people that are on the right want to wage the culture war against people that are on the left, and the people that are on the left want to wage the culture war against people that are on the right. And our entire political discourse has really become about nothing other than this, I think, somewhat artificial culture war, and that has allowed us as a society to ignore the systemic problems that libertarians understand that are actually making our society worse off. So I think you make a good point there about there not being a philosophical center. But what do you think about the RFK thing? I mean, what do you think that his run represents, and now the fact that he's sided with Trump along with Tulsi Gabbard? I think that's an interesting development.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what Kucinich has said about all this, because Kucinich was working on RFK2's team until the Israel thing happened, and then Kucinich said, "I'm out of here," because he doesn't want to support Israel at all. And I do wonder where that old, JFK type of leftist, when the ACLU defended the Nazis when they wanted to march, have a protest in Skokie, Illinois. I mean, the free speech absolutist wings are not there anymore. It's really, and that's very disconcerting, because I've never trusted the red team on free speech either,
right?
For their obvious history. I can, remember them when they wanted to cancel Motley Crue, when they wanted to cancel Bart Simpson in the very early days, and when they wanted to cancel Al Bundy and all that other stuff. So it's really, it's something I've been wondering about. But again, I think that's where the Libertarian Party has the strength, as we can say that we're free speech absolutists here too. Although, one thing I wanted to ask you, Alex, I don't know how much you've investigated this, but have you seen anything from any evidence that Chase ever supported any vaccine mandates, or ever supported any mask mandates, or supported stay-at-home orders?
No, not really. Now, I look, I'm someone too, and I don't know if you know this about me or not, but I am a public school teacher, which is one of the reasons why I am such a hardcore libertarian now. I kind of woke up with that was a big part of my awakening too, is going through this whole process and kind of seeing just how corrupt even local public school bureaucrats can be. Like, you get people a little taste of power, and it corrupts them. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm a libertarian and why I'm so skeptical of political power. And so as a public school teacher who lived through the COVID pandemic and was skeptical of the narrative surrounding the pandemic that was being propagated by the mainstream media and the political class from the very beginning, I saw firsthand how much damage these COVID policies did to the average America. It wrecked the lives of hundreds of my students and their family members, and it destroyed our community, and it tore us apart. And I believe that the people that did that to us need to pay a price. And I understand that there are a lot of people that are in the Mises caucus that feel the exact same way. I get that. And for me, like, I still get emotional about COVID sometimes because of how terrible it was for average people. And then when it turns out that all of our criticisms about the COVID regime were right in the long run, there's no apologies, there's no accountability, no one's going to jail, no one's getting fined. The pharmaceutical companies made their billions of dollars, and then they get to ride off into the sunset with no consequences. I get the frustration behind that. And it's true that if you look through Chase Oliver's Instagram profile or his Twitter profile during that time, he takes lots of pictures in masks. He talks about how he is going to socially distance himself from his friends and his neighbors. He does all that. That's true. And I think that at that time it was unnecessary. And I think that the evidence that has come out, the scientific evidence that has come out from studies like the Cochrane mass study in England and some other studies like that, have demonstrated that none of those public policy efforts actually worked or were grounded in any sort of empirical data. I totally get it. But Chase, just if we're being very objective about this, Chase never once said that he supported mask mandates. He never once said that he supported stay-at-home orders, and he never once said that he supported vaccine mandates. He was never against that. He believed it was a matter of personal choice. I think that he believed a lot of the propaganda that was being pushed on the public, but I don't think that he ever once said that people should be forced to comply with these government dictates. And so, yeah, he might have gotten it wrong, but the majority of people that I know got the pandemic wrong, like because people were nervous and scared and they didn't know what was going on and they were hearing all of these different messages for the first time. But no, I don't think that Chase ever did or said anything that was inconsistent with libertarian philosophy during that time. He was not as skeptical of the mainstream narrative as some of us who were like associated with the Mises Caucus were, but he wasn't out there saying that we had to go and get our babies vaccinated. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that, yes, there are a lot of libertarians that have that rightly have that visceral emotional reaction to COVID that can't separate those two. Like, we have libertarian principles. As long as you are not forcing these things on other people, then you are free to do them yourselves. And I think that we have to understand that that's kind of the position that Chase was in, and more or less leave it at that. You know, and hope, and I think that I think Chase has walked some of that. Like he said, I think that he's made comments to the effect of like, you know, he didn't know at that time, and so he was just doing what he was being told, trying to be a good citizen. Which I know a lot of good people that wore a mask everywhere they went and that socially distanced and that complied with the government did because they believe that they were helping their neighbors by doing so. And so, yeah, I don't think that there's any evidence at all that Chase wanted the government to intervene in the private lives of individuals to force them to comply to these mandates that the government were trying to get all of us to comply with, you know?
Yeah, that's always been my take. I don't know what kind of social pressures Chase was getting from his friends or from his family. You have some people who, if they have, I have a distant cousin who has COPD. I mean, do you have somebody in your life who, if they had gotten this virus, they would have been dead? So I don't know what, social pressures or, so and I don't, again, I do think that our anger toward this, what happened. I mean, I mostly rejected the scaremongering, and I was often going into places, and until people told me to put on a mask, I was even said, we ought to organize anti-mask flash mobs, like 10 people show up at Walmart once and all walk in not wearing masks,
right?
and something like that, and then make them throw us out. But again, that's their property, but it's their right to throw us out. But so I did, but yeah, but I do think I am very saddened, and I think a lot of libertarians are still very angry and sad about the fact that people that we thought were really solid libertarians completely caved on this. And I don't know how in the world this happened. It's really been a head scratching moment for our movement.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And I think that there were, again, it was like, wasn't it the Cato Institute or whatever that published the libertarian case for mass mandates or something like that? It's just completely irreconcilable with our philosophy. But like, to make a point that a lot of Mises Caucus people don't understand, if you were in a position where you had a job that did not require you to wear a mask and you could go into a store or a restaurant without wearing a mask and not get kicked out, then good for you. I'm glad you were in that position. But for most of us, we were put in a position where we had to choose between our livelihood and our safety or complying with some of these minimal mandates from the government. Now, I did not get the vaccine. There was no chance in this world that I was ever going to get that vaccine. That was just never going to happen for me. But like, as a teacher, I'm left with like one of two. Like, they forced us to wear masks to school, so I can go to school and put on a mask and do my best to teach my students and meet their needs, which were not being met by the education bureaucrats, by the way. Like, they completely dropped the ball on this. Or I can have them arrest me for not wearing a mask to school, and then I'm no longer a teacher and can't make an impact at all, and they replace me with someone who thinks that all of these mandates have come down from heaven and are all backed by hard empirical evidence. So you had to make those considerations. And for me too, like, I was against masking from day one. I never thought that it made any sense. Between February of 2020, when Anthony Fauci got on the television and said these masks are not going to help spread, or they're not going to help stop the spread of COVID-19, in March of 2020, where Anthony Fauci said that everyone needs to wear a mask to stop the spread of COVID-19, there was not one empirical study that was done by the public health experts that demonstrated that that was true. They changed their policies for messaging reasons and for pure political purposes. So I was always skeptical of masking. But in the state of Kentucky, our governor, Andy Beshear, was one of the COVID tyrants. And not only did he threaten to shut down stores and businesses that didn't comply with the mask mandates, he actively sued restaurants and businesses that remained open or that didn't follow the social distancing recommendations or that were over the social distancing capacity. Like, he actively sued private businesses that did not comply with his orders. And so for me, thinking about how all these people in my community, these small business owners, the parents of my students, how all of them were struggling financially and just barely trying to get by, living in a state where our government, where our governor would use his government to sue people into compliance. My thought as a Christian was, well, if I can keep these people out of trouble, then I'll put on a mask when I go into their business. That way, if someone from the state's there and watching what's going on, they can't call up the people in our state capital and have them do an investigation and maybe even maybe pursue litigation against these people. Did I want to wear a mask in public? No. Was I embarrassed to put a mask on in public? Yes. Was it inconsistent with my perspective on the scientific evidence related to the efficacy of masking? Yes, it was, but I did it because I understood that was what was going to be best for these people in my community. And with Chase Oliver, he's kind of in he was an even more prominent position than me, because he's running a very competitive campaign in the state of Georgia at a time when he's trying to appeal to those fringe voters who aren't sure if they want to go right or left. And I think that it wound up being effective because he forced a runoff and he was able to debate a mainstream Democratic politician on stage and destroy them. So if Chase Oliver had to play the game in order to continue to spread that message, I can't begrudge him of that. Like, that I understand why he would have to do that, because this is the real world that we live in. And a lot of people that scream about those of us that would like even wear a mask into a restaurant in 2021 must have been in a pretty comfortable position where those decisions couldn't actually lead to some innocent person being hurt, you know? And it was bad all around. Everything about that sucked. But it's over, and we have to be realistic about what Chase did. He never once said that the mandates were consistent with libertarian political philosophy. Never said that at all.
I never saw that either. Yeah, but So and he's certainly been anti-war to the core. I mean, he said that, and said anti-war activism was what got him into the LP in the first place. He seems to have a fairly solid knowledge of economics too, and I think he's done. And Chase is definitely on the ballot in Kentucky, right?
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, as you mentioned earlier, you also have the benefit of living in Thomas Massey's district.
Yes, I do.
Have you got a chance to meet him?
I did. I met him at Freedom Fest in Las Vegas, actually, this year. He had a meeting for a breakfast for people that donated to him at Freedom Fest. Yeah. And at the end of the breakfast, I essentially went up to one of his campaign guys and I was like, look, I live in Thomas Massey's district. I've donated to his campaign before. I did not donate this weekend, but I've donated in the past. Can I come in and meet him? And they're like, oh yeah. Like, they brought me to the front of the line and he was so nice. He's always like, I work for you. I'm so glad to get you. He was just a really cool guy. Love Thomas Massey, most principled guy in the House. And we also have Rand Paul. He's our senator. Now we have Mitch McConnell, who's a awful war criminal, terrible human being. But we have Rand Paul. So for me, it's easy because I know that every couple of years I'm going to get to vote for Thomas Massey and Rand Paul, and I can feel good about voting for the two of them.
And this was only something like 2 weeks after Thomas Massey's wife had died, I think.
It was. It was like 2 or 3 weeks afterward.
I mean, he had, and he moderated the debate. I mean, he had every reason to. He had every reason to, say no to that, but I think he probably did cancel some things, but he kept his word on that because he realized, of course, lots of people bought tickets. And that makes, but anyway. So Chase at Freedom Fest?
Yeah, he was. I ran into him, actually. I talked to him for a couple minutes at Freedom Fest.
Yeah. Also, I'm also getting the impression that, did you go by the LP's table at Freedom Fest?
The
Libertarian Party's table, yeah.
Well, there were a couple of, obviously they had the Libertarian Party of Nevada, they had the Mises Caucus. I'm trying to think. I'm sure I did. I don't recall the Libertarian Party's table in particular. I didn't get to talk to her. I saw Angela McCardle there and some other LP people, but no, I don't think I went by their table.
That's interesting. Why would the state party be competing with maybe they just both sponsoring it, but
it was just like
kind of redundant efforts there, but
Yeah,
Maybe.
well, it was just like an exhibition. So they
Yeah.
just the people for because there were being in Las Vegas, there were a lot. I mean, they had a booth. They had a booth for Trump there. There were a lot. Like I said, there were a lot of RFK supporters there,
Yeah.
and there were a lot of, I would say, like liberty-minded Republicans. And so I thought it was
Yeah.
good that there were like the Mises Institute was there, Reason Magazine was there. There were a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
mainstays that were there, and I thought that it was great for people that are more associated with kind of the RFK way of looking at politics or the Liberty Republican way of looking at politics to be exposed to our world. I thought that was pretty
Yeah.
beneficial.
Yeah. Well, I just wondered what you saw at the LP Nationals table because I've heard things from other people about that. So
Yeah, like like good or bad or
like what kind of paper, like what kind of flyers there, or what kind of what kind of posters you saw there, or anything like that.
yeah, no, I don't recall what they did other than I do remember like I said, I ran into Chase Oliver and talked to him for probably 4 or
Yeah.
5 minutes or whatever. So we are actually we're working on it right now. We've been in talks with the LCI with Chase Oliver's team, and actually probably I'm sure I have the text message on my phone right now, but I think that we're going to be doing a live stream with Chase Oliver, me and Jacob Winograd next Monday night. I don't know for sure,
Cool.
but I think we're going to have him back on there. And like I said, I've met him before and I've defended him publicly many times, so it'll be nice to be able to talk to him again.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, yeah. I've thought about having Chase back on here too, but I just I figure, well, I had him back on. I had him on. I think it was the Friday before Labor Day last year, or maybe it was the year before. But I had him on fairly. I had him on. Yeah, it was last year. Yeah. So I figured, maybe I'll ask him to come on afterwards when he has more time. I can give a recap of the campaign. And I had Termont on too. So
yeah.
I don't know if I'll ever do an open invite to all the candidates because we have so many people running for president.
Oh, it's crazy.
So many of them weren't that, and there were quite a few of them that really weren't going to be a factor. But I didn't want to be the judge and jury of, well, he's a serious candidate, he's not a serious candidate, so I'll just give them all a chance. But we did have some great conversations. I got to talk to some interesting people that I'd like to maybe see do more. But yeah, so. We talked about Chase's anti-war. Was there anything else he's done that you thought was really great?
Again, I mean, I really do. For anyone that is listening to this that doubts Chase Oliver, go on YouTube and find the debate that he did with Adrian Warnock in that runoff Senate. I get the Herschel Walker, the Republican candidate, backed out of it.
Yeah.
So I got to give full credit to Warnock for staying in and allowing a public debate to be had against Chase Oliver. But for anyone that doubts Chase, go and listen to that debate. He absolutely destroys the Democratic candidate. And it's just so obvious that on all the issues that the Democrats care about, the Libertarians are so much better. And all the issues that the Republicans are good on, Libertarians are so much better at explaining why they should be good on those, So he just absolutely wrecks them. And I think that alone, for all the Mises Caucus oriented Libertarians that are holding out their vote for Chase Oliver, just go watch that. And I hope that will at least let you know that this guy is serious. I saw him. So I guess I met him 3 times. I had him on the show, and then he came to our county affiliate about a year ago, and he gave an incredible speech talking about war, talking about the economy, talking about the Federal Reserve, and talking about just all of these issues that are facing our country today. And I thought he did such a good job of communicating his message. And I feel like we've almost, in a way, lost an opportunity to allow a libertarian who's a good communicator to get up there and just speak the libertarian message. I feel like if we would have, as a party, put a little bit more effort into promoting him as the candidate, not just promoting libertarianism, but promoting him as the candidate in particular, we might have been able to get him on some more high profile forums where he could have shared that message with people. Yeah. And it's great that we have it's great that Dave Smith has such a huge podcast and it's great that we have people like Tom Woods and Scott Horton, and all these guys are fantastic and they're doing great work promoting the message of liberty. But having a candidate like Chase Oliver, who's a very good and clear communicator, who's very consistent in his political philosophy out there promoting our ideas, I think that that's really helpful for those voters who don't really understand libertarianism. And I think that we have kind of, in a way, blown what could have been a good opportunity.
If we'd gotten more behind Chase.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Yeah, I think RFK really threw a monkey wrench into things, and
Yes.
there seems to be a kind of a resignation to it. Oh, RFK's here, so we won't even. I I don't know how that's going to impact things. Things have gotten so weird that I'm really not making any predictions on this election. I once went so far as saying, I thought Joe Jorgensen would get 10 million votes in 2020, and that didn't happen. But
Right. Well, yeah,
yeah,
I know it is just I don't know, it
yeah,
is just a shame because and I don't know because you're in Austin, Texas, and I know that
yes,
Austin is kind of a progressive part of Texas, but the state of Texas, it's a Republican state, but the Republicans that are in Texas are pretty libertarian. Like I have family that live in Texas, and I would say that, a couple of my family members are Democrats, but they're Democrats that own guns. And it's the same thing in Kentucky. We just have, Kentucky is a very Republican state, but the kind of Republicans that are produced in Kentucky are Republicans that are at least open to libertarian ideas, which is why we get people like Thomas Massey and
yeah,
Rand Paul in the state of Kentucky. And because I don't have a lot of friends that are radical
yeah,
progressives because they just don't live around here, but even my friends that are Democrats are still kind of the old school, like good on civil, like they don't think about, like most of the people I know don't think about this philosophically. So I'm putting philosophical language into their mouth, but they're good on civil liberties. They understand that, like, you can't
yeah,
just continue to raise taxes or it's going to hurt people. They don't want us to fight in every single war. Like we have a lot of people in Kentucky that I think are naturally inclined towards libertarian beliefs. And I just feel like if we could as a party crack the code and figure out how to appeal to those people and say, look, like you vote Republican because you actually believe in limited government. The Republican Party, by and large, doesn't believe in limited government, but we as libertarians are consistent every single time. I think that would be appealing to a large majority of the Americans. I think that we could
yeah.
easily get 10 million votes. It's just a matter of figuring out how to best connect with those people and let them know that the beliefs that they can't fully articulate in political or economic terms all point towards libertarianism. It's really a matter of, and I understand there are a million different ways within the Libertarian Party that people are pursuing this, but a part of it is just like, I think that this message is so compelling, and if we could just find a way to package it in a way that was palatable for the average American, we could see a real success on a national stage.
Yeah, I know Kentucky has some of those old blue voters, like the same that where I'm from, originally West Virginia had. You might call them the Appalachian Democrats or the country Democrats, and Joe Manchin is certainly one of them. Uh, I think they're definitely not woke. They're pretty much pro-gun. They're not really for environmentalism, which is, I think, what really turned them against turned them against Gore in 2000 in West Virginia, which was, and of course if Gore had won West Virginia, Florida would have been moot. But yeah, I've definitely seen changes there. I don't know if you've seen similar changes in Kentucky politics as well, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, so many people are moving out of Appalachia that it's just not a factor anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I think a lot of the problem is too, Chris, is that, and I see this from the inside. The public school system has for decades, at least since No Child Left Behind in 2002, and probably earlier than that, they've been deliberately, in my opinion, marginalizing social studies instruction. I mean, this was the core of No Child Left Behind, is that federal accountability standards were all going to be based on math and language arts, and the entire public education system, because so much of it is tied up with these federal funds, adjusted itself to making sure that these students could perform very well on these end of the year math and language arts common assessments, and social studies was marginalized. So what that has done in our country is produced a generation of American adults that have no concept of history. They have no concept of philosophy. They have no concept of civics. They have no concept of economics or theology, any of the disciplines that you need to have at least a rudimentary understanding of to make sense and meaning of this world. The average American adult does not have any of the background information that they need to have a coherent and consistent worldview. And so there are a lot of Americans that have really good intuitions, but they don't know how to put those intuitions into words and then take those articulated words and turn it into a form of social or political or theological action. So we are fighting an uphill battle as libertarians because we understand economics and we understand political philosophy, and we have a language that we can use to explain the phenomenon that is occurring around us. But that is like a foreign language to most Americans. And a lot of Americans don't even think that having a consistent and coherent philosophy is important. And so the question for us as libertarians is not only how do we push our libertarian message, but how do we help people understand that it's important to think about this stuff in a systematic way instead of just saying, well, the TV tells me that I should feel angry at this person who's not like me and who votes for a different team than me. It's an uphill battle, but I think that there are, and we're not going to be able to solve this through the education system. That's the public schools. The United States public school system is, I think, beyond repair at this point. I think it really comes down to people like us having conversations like this that people go and watch and then walk away from, realizing that there are different ways to think about the world than the left-right binary that's been perpetuated by the mainstream media and the political class, mostly for their financial interests. So we are fighting an uphill battle, but our ideas are right. Like, I mean, Chris, we know that libertarianism works. It makes sense of the world. It's philosophically irrefutable. It works as an a priori. It explains all the social and economic problems that we're facing today. We just have to connect this with the average American, and we have to help explain to people why these issues are so important and how the world could be a much better place if everyone adopted these principles. And I think that that's really where our fight lies. And yeah, I think this is where like our conversation about the Libertarian Party is really, really important. But ultimately, the Libertarian Party should just be the vehicle for these ideas. And it's the ideas that I think are really going to transform this world.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Since your involvement with the Mises Caucus, where do you think the Mises Caucus goes from here?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I would like to think that the Mises Caucus continues to focus on the decentralized revolution project and puts money and effort into winning these local races and changing our country from the ground up. It is going to be really, really, really interesting to see what happens to the Mises Caucus if Trump loses in November, because I think that if Trump wins and the concessions that they were hoping to get from Trump, even if it's minor concessions, getting one libertarian oriented Republican in Trump's cabinet and getting Ross Ulbricht freed, I think that the Mises Caucus can at least say we might not have gotten our candidate elected, but we did get some concessions that are very important to us. And if that happens, then I think that the Mises Caucus could continue to be a power block within the Libertarian Party. I think that if Trump loses and Chase Oliver does very poorly, I think that a lot of people that are associated with the Libertarian Party will view that as a Mises Caucus failure. And that might spell the end for the Mises Caucus, that there might have to be something that comes out of the ashes of that in the future. I'm with you. I don't want to make any predictions about what's going to happen in November because, as we both know, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris might not even be alive or their party's nominee in a month. We have no idea what's going to happen.
I don't want to go down that road.
Yeah, but I do think
anyway,
that it's only the Mises Caucus's only chance of being a long-term and viable block within the Libertarian parties if Trump wins.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, the other thing too, that Alex, that worries me too, though. You know, Trump didn't say who he's if he doesn't put a libertarian in his cabinet, that would be nice, but he did. And I'm thinking, oh God, what if it's somebody like Tyler Cohen or even some people are saying it might be Peter Thiel. I mean, oh God, those people aren't libertarians.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, oh yeah, you know.
Yeah, it would be terrible. And that's
that would be worse.
Right. Who does Trump define as a libertarian? You know, and basically the only time besides his speech at the Libertarian National Convention when I've ever heard Donald Trump talk about libertarianism, and you might remember this interview, but somebody, I can't remember who it was, but there was someone it came up in a conversation he was having with someone in the press. And he's like, oh yeah, I like libertarians. I play golf with Rand Paul. And that's Trump's knowledge of libertarian philosophy, is that he knows that Rand Paul is kind of a libertarian and he plays golf with him.
I call Rand Paul an 80% libertarian because I think that's about where he is. I always put that qualifier on it. Because that's where I don't think he's definitely not perfect, but you know, but he also misses. Yeah. I mean, I think, yes, and sometimes I think if he, I would love to have 3 hours in a room with Vivek. I really would love to sit down. Because sometimes I really, really like him, and I think he'd sit down and be willing to listen. And he even admitted my first presidential vote was for Badnarik. So obviously there's something there that we can work on. It's
and I hope that he continues to have a good relationship with Donald Trump, and that Donald Trump listens to him, because that's really the key with Donald Trump. If Donald Trump wins and surrounds himself with people like Ramaswamy and RFK Jr., then I think that we do actually start seeing a lot of these promises that he made to the libertarians come true. If he surrounds himself with like Jamie Dimon from BlackRock or State Street or whichever, if he surrounds himself with people like that, then it's going to be exactly like what it was before.
Yes, but we also know he's surrounding himself with Sheldon Adelson. So that's,
yeah.
I mean, and we don't know how long, Vivek's going to be around for a while, but RFK too, we don't know how long he's going to be around. I mean,
it's true.
What do you think about Termot?
Honestly, man, I'll be honest. I don't know really anything about him at all. I know that there have been out, and I guess he was a police officer or something like that, which, I'm a public employee too. So it's not a disqualifier. And there are people there are a lot of people that have woken up inside the system. And I don't hold that against anyone. I don't know anything about him. We talk about how for the major parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, the vice presidential nominee is relevant for about 2 weeks, and then everyone forgets who they are. The Libertarian Party vice presidential nominee is even less relevant in the long run than the candidate. So I don't know what to think about him, other than he's running on the ticket with Chase Oliver, and I'm going to vote for Chase. So I guess I'm going to vote for him too.
But some of our VP nominees have made it a good springboard to get out there for other activism, I think.
Spike,
Spike certainly did, and I oh gosh, I so wish Spike had run, but I understand why. But he had other things to do. But Spike was the only guy who could have brought the party together. At least the only. I don't know. If there's anybody else out there who might have, I don't know. I've said, for a while, I'd like to see the LP reach out to Aaron Rodgers or somebody like that. Maybe that could have unified the party, but
that'd have been cool.
I gotta ask, is there anybody else in Kentucky that we should be aware of,
politically speaking?
And it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody in the LP, but just maybe a good state legislator or something like that. I suppose there's some good ones.
I'm sure there has to be. I will say that a lot of there's a guy from Boone County who is which is the county next. I live in Kenton County. Boone County is the county to the west of ours, named TJ Roberts, who
I follow him.
He's really great. A lot of our state representatives would be the worst neocons in the entire world if they were ever elected to Congress. And so, I don't know, the Kentucky's Republican Party is pretty bad for the most part.
I'll tell you what, I lived in Ohio for 6 years. It's worse. I mean, I definitely think it's a little better down here. There are probably at least a handful of good people I can name, but there aren't. But I just look at the fact, that the 2022 primary, they gave Greg Abbott 2/3 of the vote. They went out and they went out and easily gave him, and there was the second place guy was another, as I said, establishment hack named Alan West, and then there was a guy named Don Huffines, and he got less than 12% of the vote. In spite of having the endorsement of Ron Paul, I said, well, that shows you how many people care about Ron Paul's endorsement, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah, which it sucks.
Because he got less than 12%. And Chad Prather seemed like he was also pretty solid. It's very, Cruz is not a horrible senator. I mean, he's certainly better than McConnell, but he's not Rand Paul either. And I used to live in Chip Roy's district. He's not quite Massey, but he's probably, at least in the House, in the top 20.
Yeah. Well, there's some good people out there, and I think that the fact that Thomas Massey has survived being primaried by the GOP 3 or 4 times, says a lot. And I think that sends a signal to other Republicans that might go soft on some of these more limited government positions that they take, that they can't actually survive a primary if they stick to their principles and their constituents understand that they're doing good work. So hopefully we will get more people like Thomas Massey who can survive the GOP machine. And eventually the Republicans will realize that they're not going to be able to win unless they actually become the party of limited government.
I hope so. I hope we can make this happen. I mean, one thing I do worry about, and even in the LP, the anti-immigrant take that's just coming out. I don't know how although it seems like it's getting to a point where it's almost like the government is now shipping in immigrants, which I'm just like, okay, why are you doing this? It's rather odd that you would just have, but I hardly believe anything the media say about it.
Right.
Yeah,
me too. And it's one of those issues that it's really complicated. And as a libertarian, I can see philosophically how the argument will work on both sides. I think that from the libertarian perspective, we believe that people should be able to freely move wherever they want. I also understand that for those libertarians that are concerned about restricting immigration, the reason why they feel that way is that there are, it's like you were saying, there are immigrants that are coming here. It seems like the Biden administration has enabled a lot of immigrants to come here, and then they've given them lots and lots and lots of public services that American taxpayers have to fund in the hopes that when these people are eligible to vote, they will vote for Democrats. I do think that that's a part of their calculation. And I can understand, if you're a libertarian, you're like, okay, well, that's not libertarian immigration. That's the government bringing people in that's going to steal from the productivity of American workers. I understand. It's such an awful. The whole issue is just a train wreck from start to finish. I don't have any idea how to solve that problem other than just limiting the size of the federal government.
It's a train wreck in so many ways. Yeah. So. Yeah. It's So what else? What else is going on in your podcast?
Yeah, well, hey, I like I said, I really appreciate you having me on today, and it's been great talking with you. So my podcast is called the Protestant Libertarian Podcast. Like I said, my background is in biblical studies, so about half the show is devoted to economics and political philosophy. The other half is devoted to biblical studies and theology. I interview a lot of biblical scholars, but it's always on issues that are at least tangentially related or of interest to libertarians. So if you're a libertarian and you're steeped in the philosophy, and you kind of go back and look at the guests I've had on my show, even the episodes that are purely theological or about biblical studies, there's always some relation to the biblical perspective that I have had that has put me on the trajectory to libertarianism. And so it's cool because I have a group of people in my audience that don't really care about politics very much, but they like to listen to it because they love hearing me talk to these biblical scholars. And then there are some people that might have a marginal interest in theology, it's something that they're curious about but not deeply devoted to, and it gives them an exposure to some ideas or concepts they might not have had before. So I put out new episodes every Tuesday, and I usually try to throw one or two extra episodes out on a Thursday every month, try to get between 5 and 6 episodes. I do some writing for the Libertarian Christian Institute, and I've been a guest on several of their flagship podcasts and stuff like that. So we got a lot of stuff going on. It's been good.
Yeah, there's a lot of good people doing a lot of good work. Have you read any books by the Reverend Edmund Opitz?
I have not. No.
Do you know who I'm talking about?
No, I'm not familiar with him.
Longtime scholar who worked at the Foundation for Economic Education.
Okay.
One of the nicest people I ever met. I met him at their seminar back in '94. He was almost 80 at the time, but great guy. Norman Horn knows who he is, but yeah, I don't know. It's that was a great seminar. What do you mean when you say biblical scholars?
Oh, so biblical studies is an academic discipline that is devoted to the historical analysis of the documents that are contained within the Christian scriptures. Yeah. So a biblical scholar is someone who devotes their entire life to studying historically and philosophically and theologically the text that we find in the Bible. That's what I mean by that. Yeah.
I was going to say, because I definitely make a plug for the one lovely lady I had on a while back. She's from Armenia, and she's very concerned about a lot of, I guess I'd call them very old Christian monuments now being threatened there because they're no longer in Armenia. Yeah. Which is the oldest Christian country in the world. Yeah. That made it the official religion. Armenia really has a place in my heart because I was there 2 years ago, and it's so amazing to be around these old buildings. There's something powerful about that. What is the root of evangelical support for Israel?
Oh my gosh! Wow. Well, I only have a couple minutes left, so I'll make
Okay,
this as brief as possible. So man, it
yeah.
there are a lot of different reasons for this. I actually did an episode where it came out like the day, or it came out like 3 days after October 7th. Kind of serendipitous when I interviewed this woman, but it's a scholar. Who Ann Perez is her name, and she wrote a book called Understanding Zionism last year, and she tries to, at least a part of it is the book is broadly about Zionism and how it developed from the end of the 19th century through the 20th century. But she has, as she is an evangelical Christian, and so she has a large section in her book that explains evangelical support for Israel. There is an interpretation of certain parts of the Bible, including the book of Revelation, that suggests that in order for Jesus to come back, Israel has to be reconstituted as an independent political entity. So as a part of God's end time plans for creation, Israel has to be reunited and reconstituted. And there are many evangelicals that see the modern nation state of Israel as that prophetic reconstitution of Israel. Now, that is a minority position within Christianity. The majority of world Christians do not believe, and I'm very much one of those, that the modern nation state of Israel represents God's eschatological Israel, or in any way actually represents global Judaism. There are a lot of Jews that are against Zionism, but a lot of it comes down to particularly American readings of certain parts of the New Testament and the belief that we have to support the modern nation state of Israel in order for God to bring about the end of history. That's really what it comes down to.
Okay, yeah. So we'll yeah, you're with, yeah. So, and where else can we find you on the web before we go?
Oh, perfect, man. Yeah. So I'm on all of the major podcasting platforms. So Spotify, all that stuff. Just started a YouTube page. Don't have much video content up there now, but we're working on developing that. And then you can find my stuff and all the other great podcasts and writings from the Libertarian Christian Institute at LIbertarianChristians.com. We got a bunch of merch out now that you can go and buy if you like our podcast and you want to support us or if you want to donate. So LibertarianChristians.com, you can find everything there.
Okay. Yeah. Please like the channel, or like the video, subscribe to the channel, check out my Substack, go buy my novel, Escape from the Village. Go to buymeacoffee.com if you want to give a little money to this. And thank you, Alex Bernardo, for making the case for Chase Oliver. I'm Chris Baker. We're out.